Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives 3. And tonight, I am so happy to bring back Garland Nixon here to Mystery Island Studio, courtesy of the internet. And Garland, you've been so good to us. You came down and gave us a really nice seminar on the reality of practicing journalism in Washington, D.C. and around the world. And that was a year ago, and
Wow.
and since then we've been having these wonderful conversations, and it's just been delightful. And but before we get started tonight, I have noticed that you are just really exploding on alternative media. I mean, you're everywhere. Your shows are getting thousands of views, and I feel like I want to hang on to your coattails because you're really blasting off. But so update us as to where to find Garland and what's new and exciting.
Well, I'm doing, of course, I do a show on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C. That's 105.5 FM. And that is Monday through Friday. It airs from 6 to 8 p.m. Every Monday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm on KPFK. That's a Pacifica, FM Pacifica radio station in Los Angeles. And that's been going really well. I'm very happy about the way that's going. Then Fridays from 6 to 7, I do a show in Washington D.C. on WPFW, which is also Pacifica, and so I really enjoy. I get to do both coasts, and then of course I do. Let's see. I think Thursday I'm going to be on Primo Radical's show. A lot of times people will ask me to go on various online shows. I do that every chance I get, and of course I have my my YouTube show, and now I'm on Rockfin. I do, and that's ROKFIN. I'm on Rockfin. As many of us, we've seen our new disinformation board come online, and Scary Poppins is out there. She's ready to toss us offline. So I see Rockfin as an alternative option that I think I have to have, and I'm kind of enjoying it.
Maybe you could get a spoonful of sugar.
Makes the disinformation go down in the most delightful way.
Oh yeah, yes, that's right. And but getting back to Rockfin for a second, you mentioned a lot of people are going there. I think about it, but I wonder, well, how would you describe it as compared to YouTube or Facebook or just the ones that everybody's familiar with? Is it any different? How does it work?
A couple of things about Rockfin. Number one, the video is definitely better. The video, they've really focused on the video being better, so it's really good video. Now, here's the difference too. On YouTube, anybody who wants can get a YouTube page and just put whatever the heck they want and talk about praying mantises if that's suits their fancy. Rockfin's not like that. Rockfin, you have to kind of be invited on, or you have to be interviewed and accepted, so they have more a limited number of shows. I mean, still there's a lot of shows, but it's not like YouTube. It's not just like you turn on there and figure out how to fix your hot water heater. So it's not monitored, so you can do what you want. So a lot of people were able to do a lot. I think it really blew up during COVID because people were able to go in there and talk about things in the way they wanted to. So I like it because I can talk about whatever I want. The video's great, and it's a good platform. I think it's in the long run, it's really going to move as move up. So I like Rockfin. It's ROKFIN. Now here's another thing about Rockfin. A person on there can do premium, so you can pay $9.99 a month and become like a member, right? If you do that, any channel that you belong to, you can watch the premium. You don't have to pay $9.99 per month. You just pay $9.99, and anybody who has premium stuff up there, you can watch that. So I'm going to do, like Patreon, where you do all your stuff, but you put some stuff just for channel members, and they encourage you to do some of that. Then I'm going to have some of that up there, some special stuff. So it's great. It's really good.
Well, I just feel like I get bounced around. I've got 3 YouTube channels right now, and I feel fairly comfortable, but I'm not liking the fact that my audience is split into 3 parts now,
Yeah.
and so it's just not stable for me. It's not comfortable, and but I'm glad to hear that. One more question: is it like a um, is it oriented to one side or the other, or politically, or can you find a broad spectrum, or
Yes, a very broad spectrum, and it just tends to be a lot of people on. I like Rockfin because, for the most part, people that are going to question the narrative, people that are going to question the mainstream narrative, push back on the mainstream narrative. There are a lot of that's what you'll find a lot of on Rockfin. I mean, that is Rockfin. People who are pushing back against the mainstream narrative. You don't have to, but I mean, it's allowed. So there's a lot of people like us who are always concerned about getting censored on Facebook.
yeah?
I mean, YouTube, Twitter, etc.
Now, one more on your media presence. For instance, at PFW in Washington, okay, um, very traditional left Pacifica station. Um, how do they receive your message? More broadly, what I think I'm really trying to get at is you have the potential of getting through to a serious audience, whereas most of us, the folks that you met when you came down to the charrette, we're struggling for a voice, but we think that the message that you have is essential. So bravo for getting out there. And now tell me a little bit about that experience.
Well, as an example, so when the Ukraine thing started, the first couple weeks, I got some, my callers, and I'd get some, you're a Putin stooge, a Russian bot, or whatever, because I push back against the mainstream narrative. I mean, every show, I always say, you're being had, took, lied to, hoodwinked, bamboozled, the old Malcolm X kind of lines. But the last several weeks, after about the third week, what I get now, and this is in LA, and LA is a blue no matter who land, right? But what I get now is, Garland, you're doing good work. Keep up the good work. I love your show. I don't want to miss your show. I get people call in and say, you better watch it. I bet they're watching you because you're saying things that they don't like. And so I think I get people, there's been dramatic changes over the last several weeks or the last 2 months since the Ukraine war started, between people who would just go along with the mainstream narrative and those who are starting to say, you're making sense. And I brought some good guests on, and I just made, just to me, common logical sense to people. But that's what I try to do, and I think that brings a lot of people over.
Excellent. Well,
Can
well,
I
what,
can I give you one example that I use? One quick example that I use. So I say, when we're told to be censored, that we're told you're only supposed to watch the approved news sources or read the approved newspapers or websites or whatever, right? I said, if you do that, you're only going to get the approved narrative and the approved conclusion. I said, this is the way I look at it. Something that you and I know something about. Think about a jury. I said, here's an example. You split a jury into 3 groups of 4. The first 4 only hears the prosecution. The second 4 only hears the defense. The third 4 hear both the prosecution and the defense. Which group is going to be best suited to make a competent decision? I said, that's when I say, do I read the New York Times and the Washington Post and all these other things? Yes, I do. Do I read RT and Sputnik, Press TV, which is Iran, Global Times, which is China, France 24? All of them. I read the ones, globalresearch.ca. I might go to InfoWars. I might go to Zero Hedge, some of the places that people may call the conspiracy theory, whatever they call them. I'm going to go to all of them. And by the time I hit all of them, I'm going to come up with my own idea of what I think. And so I talk to people like that on the air in a way that, it's logical. It makes sense. And I have people call in and say, that makes sense. I'm saying, I'm not saying any of it's true, but if you take in enough of it, you'll have a more well-rounded view of the world. And so that's the way I talk to people like they're adults.
well, thanks. I mean, I feel like I'm getting a lesson here, and I appreciate it. I'm stealing your metaphor there too. Very good. Well, maybe I'll just toss you an issue. Supreme Court leak.
Here's the thing. My first thought is, there is nothing that there's no way to communicate now. There's nothing you can move. You can't move your little finger without the NSA or the CIA or some three-lettered agency being able to figure out where you're going, which way you're moving, what kind of food you're eating, and why, right? I find it difficult to believe that they can't figure out who leaked it. I find it near impossible to believe that someone could have access to that information and they couldn't figure out who had access to the information, and they couldn't go after the person and prosecute them or whatever, which means this, that it's you know what I mean? It's part of the game. That it is, the Democrats are lower than a snake's belly in a wagon rut right now. They are done, toast, finished. Everybody, they've been, let me put it a different way. They've been exposed as the cynical liars that they are, right? And so they are looking for a way out, to change the subject, a distraction, something that they can try to say to their poor suckers and their cult. Hey guys, what is it? You need us to protect you from these evil Republicans, so you have to come to the poll. And that's what it's about. They're not going to do anything. I don't want to talk too long on this because you might have another question, but here's what I want to say. If the Democrats wanted to do something about it, I'm a lefty. 2009, Barack Obama had a veto-proof majority in the Senate. He could have passed this. He could have. I grew up. My dad was a longshoreman. I'm a big union guy. I said, "Hey, you can deal with Taft-Hartley now." If you're a lefty, you could have had a laundry list of things, and one of them, apparently, that's the abortion issue is supposed to be a Democratic Party issue. They could have dealt with all this stuff, but they did none of it because they don't really care. They just want these issues to divide people and to get people to vote for them, because they're not going to do anything for the working class, the working poor, or the poor. Everything goes to the rich. So to me, it's just another scandalous scam that they don't want to do anything about, but just looking for a way to motivate people to come to the polls, because nobody has a reason to vote for a Democrat anymore.
Did you say Obama?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Obama's been, kind of lurking lately, and there's some articles here and there about, he's like really pulling the strings behind all this stuff. And when you mentioned 2009, that was the height of my ecstasy, and as a liberal, I was on
Yep.
the PIC. I was part of the, I met the boss,
Yep.
and it was the most exciting time of my life. And that was just the absolute apex of my hopes, that remember hope?
Yeah, that's all we got was
Yeah,
hope.
that was me. But I mean, I bought into it 100%, and I hung on to it all the way through his presidency. But Andy Craig wrote a terrific book, Presidential Puppetry,
Yes.
in which one of the things that he does, and he's such a fantastic journalist that he really nails it. That the early CIA connection is absolutely essential to understanding Obama, and now what's all this stuff going on right now. Who is driving the policy that we see Biden executing?
Yeah. And I'm going to say one thing. When you say Obama is pulling the strings, I would put it a different way. The people who are pulling the strings, right? They want, okay, they stuck poor old empty shell husk of a man, Joe Biden, up there to give the appearance that there was a president, so they can pull the strings through him. He is so pathetically, I mean, just we don't have to. The guy's done. He's shaking hands with the invisible man. He's controlled by the Easter Bunny. I mean, the guy's done. And I think what Obama is, they looked at it and they're like, we got to have a more competent mask, right? If we're going to deal with the issues that we got to deal with, we need to have somebody there who appears to be competent, who will do what we're told. So I really don't believe that, quote Obama's pulling the strings, but there were powerful people behind Obama pulling the strings. And I think part of it is they're looking at the Biden people, because a lot of this stuff is um, wars and fights amongst various factions of the ruling elite. And I think that's part of what's going on now. Various factions of the ruling elite are fighting it out. But I think they use Biden or they use Obama as a conduit for their power to go through, because we're not really allowed to see who the people are that are pulling the strings. I mean, I remember seeing one of them, and it was a very, very ugly thing. You remember the other year when Mike Bloomberg ran?
Mm-hmm.
And he came out and he just talked, and he is a madman. He was a very angry, ornery, sociopathic madman. I mean, he just got out on stage and he was just angry. We're like, holy God, what's with this guy? And you could see these are the kind of people, the Mike Bloombergs of the world, that are behind this thing, and they're really horrible human beings.
And, when you say Mike Bloomberg, to me, you say Johns Hopkins. Baltimore, and the essential, I mean, the incredible reach of Johns Hopkins all throughout the state, and it's like the biggest employer in Maryland, leaving aside the federal and the military.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely huge, and this idea of the imposition of a totalitarian medical system is very much tied to the tradition of Johns Hopkins, and that reflects the Bloomberg donation, quote unquote, and skull and bones behind the whole venture of creating Johns Hopkins. So there's layers and layers of secret society, and you name it, eugenics.
John Hopkins was named in that lawsuit where I think the lawsuit's still ongoing, where it was kind of like the Tuskegee experiment. You familiar with that? They went down to Guatemala, same
Yeah.
thing, and they injected venereal disease into the poorest people that were out, just peasants basically, who couldn't read or write or whatever, and they told them they were going to help them and give them something, and they injected venereal diseases and experimented on these people like Nazis. And John Hopkins worked with the federal government, surprising, to do that.
So you see what I'm saying? From there, who's running all of this statistical stuff in the pandemic?
Right.
Johns Hopkins. And those you start to see that there's a small group that's all connected, and the things that are going on in the world in one field, whether it's medicine or war, you can start to see these tentacles where they start to converge.
When it comes to war, I figured something out lately in discussions with various people, and that is the people who want war with Russia versus the people who want war with China, right? That's ruling elites, the factions of the ruling elite. So the people who wanted to invade an Iraq or Libya because they got oil, right? First of all, if you want to understand why the U.S. empire wants war with someone, all you have to do is look at what that country produces. What does Russia have? Oil, gas, and commodities, right? So the oil industry, the commodities billionaires, right? The mining, the gold, the timber, the oil, the commodities billionaires, they want war with Russia because they want to take all of that stuff from Russia. Now, what about the other billionaires? The industry, the industrialists. The industrialists are upset because they moved all of their industry to China and took our jobs because they could get cheap labor. But the Chinese weren't stupid. The Chinese took the technology, they advanced on some of it, they started making their own stuff, and they worked hard and they became industrialists. And now they are challenging and competing with the US industrialists to a point where they're surpassing them. So what do you have? The two factions of the ruling elites, the gas and oil and commodities companies, they want to go after Russia. The industrialists, they want to go after China. You see what I mean? So it's while they will convince Americans we've got to go after Putin because he's not friendly to gay people, and that's a big, what they try to argue, that the Russians are too conservative. They're a conservative society, and they are a conservative society, but they got a right to be a conservative society if that's what works for them. It's their, you know what I mean, their culture, right? And then the Chinese, I don't know, they just say the Chinese Communist Party. They use the word communist, and then a bunch of people are like, that's right, we got to fight the communists. Yay, go after the communists. But what they don't realize is both teams are being sheep herded into a confrontation with other countries full of working people just like them, so that these billionaires can either take Russia's gas and oil and comedy stuff, or these other billionaires can defeat China and their industrial competition. And it has nothing to do with us. And we're not going to get anything out of it anyway, but dead in a war if they have their way. And besides, them, less hungry mouths to feed. They'll be happy if there's far fewer of us.
I love that division. I think it reminds me of the article I think we discussed last time from the Hudson Institute along those lines, dividing it into the oil, gas, and mining, and the industrialists, and that type of a division is very, very helpful. Now, maybe just for fun, let me throw out a couple of names and see if how you see they fitting into this. BlackRock, Vanguard.
Yeah, well, now that's what is it? Fire, right? Fire, insurance, real estate, and I forgot. I mean, excuse me, what is it? Insurance, real estate. What's the F in fire stand for? Whatever, you get my point.
Yeah,
The money people and all, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but here's the thing about it. I don't know if you've noticed in the last few years, they really, BlackRock, Vanguard, etc., kind of control the government. When the CARES Act happened and they gave away $5 to $7 trillion to these corporations, they actually had the guy who runs BlackRock to come in and to help the government disperse the funds. When the Andrew Cuomo in New York, when he was doing all of his COVID stuff, they brought in the people from BlackRock to help them so-called rebuild the New York economy. So basically, to me, when I hear Vanguard and BlackRock, to me, those are examples of the reality of why we don't have a democracy. These people have seized control of the White House. They've seized control of the Congress, and basically they can get anybody they want in or out. They can get whatever they want. They can get full control. So that's, to me, when I hear those names, what I think is we don't have a democracy. We have an oligarchy, and those are the people who are making the decisions. And sadly, there are a lot of Americans who still think that we got part of that, that somehow they're listening to us, or they may listen to us.
So there's 100,000 cubicles with people in them, with computers and the latest internet and everything, and each one of them has a little bitty part to play in the great decision. Of half of BlackRock is for the China war, and half of BlackRock is for the Russia war, and they have to compete to get their plan approved by the higher ups that are going to say, okay, let's go to war with Russia, or let's go to war with China. And so inside of these great financial pyramids, these people are trying to work their way up the pyramid by figuring out the best way for their team to win the prize and destroy the world.
Well, here's what I think, though. What I think is, and I hope this isn't too complicated, in the same way at the end of World War II, why was the US so successful? Because everybody else had been bombed flat to the ground, and we were the only guys left standing, right? And so it was easy for us to become the industrial power of the world. At one point, I think 50% or 60% of the world's industrial capacity was the US, because everybody else had been blown to smithereens, and slowly they've been catching up. So I think that what they want to do, and if you look at what's going on here, right after Iraq, after they had a lot of problems when a lot of soldiers died, when there was some carnage and there was body bags coming home. What I think they want to do is almost like the old Star Trek episode where they had people, they had a war on this planet, and all they would do is they would do a computer simulation, and they'd say, "You guys just lost 1,000 people," and they take 1,000 citizens, and they had to march into this room, and they would just go away. Right? They don't want to blow the stuff up. They don't. They can't afford to blow China up. Look, Nike and all of these companies that get all of their stuff, they can't afford to blow China up. Or they don't want to blow Russia up. They don't want to be nuked. What I think they want to do, and you can see them doing it already, they want to wipe out the economy of Russia and bring them to their knees. They want to do this proxy war. They want to do all of these sanctions, and they want to wipe out Russia's economy and bring them to their knees economically without risking a getting nuked, because they don't want to die. They're chickens of all. And they want to do the same thing to China. So I think their thing is, we want to economically get to a place where we were at the end of World War II, where, including Europe, look what they're doing to Europe, where Europe is a pile of rubble economically, where Russia and China and all of our competitors are economically a pile of rubble, and we're the only ones standing. And it doesn't matter if we're standing a little. They don't care if our people are hungry, as long as we're still on our feet and they're all crushed economically. And then we can maintain full control and maintain a unipolar world. Now, it's a madman's conquest, and it's not going to work, and it's already failing. And so what's interesting to watch is, as their plan, it completely fails in every way, shape, or form in Ukraine, the only thing they have is the narrative. So the best they can do is, like, I pay very close attention to this military. Russia's winning, but all they can do is convince Americans that Russians losing. They can say, okay, these sanctions, and they've all convinced themselves. And you know how they are when they get in a room and they all convince themselves of something. It's got to be true, right? They convince themselves that if they just sanction Russia enough, that everything will fall. But you and I both know Russia has commodities. If you got commodities, people always need those. It ain't going to fall. But all they can do is say, more sanctions, that's not working. More sanctions, that's not working. More sanctions. And the good thing about more sanctions is they get to destroy Europe's economy, and they want Europe's economy turned to a pile of rubble, so they can kill two birds with one stone in their twisted minds. They can say, we're going to wipe out Russia's economy and the Europe's economy at the same time. But because Russia can grow their own food and create their own energy, and they have a powerful enough military to defend themselves, those three things, they can't wipe Russia's economy out. They can't wipe Russia out. But Europe is fried. Europe is done, finished.
I thought Ursula von der Leyen was in charge of Europe, and she said everything is going to be fine as long as everybody gets their vaccine. I don't know what happened. What happened to the World Economic Forum, and what happened to all of these the Davos people? Have they given up? You're saying Europe is screwed? Well, maybe the Davos people are not screwed, but the common people of Europe are, as often happens. Remember things like the Iceland, when in Iceland the banks suddenly went belly up, and who took the cash off the table, and who ended up paying for it? The people always end up paying for that in one way or another. That kind of shenanigans goes on in Europe, goes on everywhere, but that's kind of thing. Well, they are trying to impose this World Economic Forum, fourth industrial revolution, all that stuff. How does that fit into what you just said?
Yeah, I'm with you, because I think they're one of the issues that they have is this. They have a plan, and you were right, and I believe that COVID was a big part of it. COVID, with the response to COVID was going to, everybody gets vaxxed, everybody gets on their digital ID, everybody gets under control. We go to digital money, everything was going to work fine, but that fell apart with a number of, we could get into our, but that fell apart and it didn't work. But as you know, they don't give up. So after that fell apart, they're like, okay, well, this Ukraine thing, we'll utilize that to bring everybody together, to get everybody on the same page. But I think they have miscalculated. There's this, they're powerful people and they have the money and a lot of power, but they're also incompetent, and they're also involved in groupthink so much that they start believing things and they forget that there are common people out here, and they don't take into account what you and I can look at it and we can say, people in Europe, the common people are not going to be able to afford bread. When the history of Europe is, when people can't afford bread, it's off with the leader's head, right? As people can't afford bread and common regular things, man, they ain't going to be happy in Europe. And might I add, at the same time, you inject 6 million refugees. So now you've got people running around, you've got more hungry mouths to feed. It started off, and I feel sorry for the people in Europe, I really do. They started off like they threw these refugees, they created this disaster, and they convinced the poor suckers in Europe to buy into it. And they're like, yes, send us some Ukrainians, we'll take them to our house. I read a story where one family, they took in a Ukrainian family of 7 and 4 dogs. And they gave them in Europe 300, and in England they gave them 350 pounds a month, not for each, for the whole family, to help take care of 7 people and 4 dogs. Well, how long is that going to last with prices going up? So Europe is going to become an absolute scalding hot, boiling pot of anger due to all of these dynamics coming together. And I don't think the ruling elite have taken that into account, and I don't think they're going to be able to control it.
Fascinating. That's an interesting way to look at it.
No, I just said, I think the big part that's really going to be disastrous is all of these refugees. People get pissed when they don't have stuff for their family, and there's all of these other people, and the government's going to, what are you going to do? A lot of them don't speak the language. They have different cultures. They're here. Where are they going to work? They're going to be competing for jobs and food and shelter, and they get to ride the train free, and you don't get to ride the train free, and you're mad because of that. Man, that I think that refugee thing is really going to infuriate the people, and that they're going to start asking some uncomfortable questions of their leaders.
Mm-hmm. And Britain. We haven't mentioned them. What part are they playing, and are they winning or losing?
Something interesting I'd like to say about Britain. I learned something. So, when Brexit happened, I covered it. I covered it for Sputnik, and I covered it for Fox. I was still with Fox back then. So I covered it for Fox, did a video and all, and sent it back to New York, and they played it and all that kind of stuff. And the Brits were so happy. And to be honest, I was a pro-Brexit guy. I'm on the left, but I was a pro-Brexit guy because I felt as though the EU takes away, the sovereignty of individual nations, right? So I was pro-Brexit. I'm a pro-sovereignty person. But since I've come to realize something, in the same, NATO and the EU are the same things. They're tools for the US empire to control all of these states. So if the US has to control England and France and Italy, all these vassal colonies that have no sovereignty individually, it's a pain in the neck. You bring them all together under NATO, or you bring them all together under the EU, and it's easier to control all of them at one time. However, if Britain breaks away, it doesn't matter. They're still under your control. And if you look at what England has done since Brexit, they've been even more under control of the US empire than they were under EU. So the truth is, EU was all a fraud. NATO is all a fraud. It doesn't matter if a European country gets out from under the EU. If they don't get out from under the US empire, they still have no sovereignty. And if you have no sovereignty, you're nothing but a vassal and a colony. And right now, when the US empire says to any of the leaders, Boris Johnson, Olaf Scholz, says, here's what your job is. I want you to destroy your economy. I want you to wipe out your own economy. They're going to say, yes, sir. And then they're going to do it. I don't care if they're in or out of the EU. So the whole EU thing was a fraud. This really is about countries. When Marine Le Pen, and I'm a lefty, but here's the reality. Le Pen said, we don't want to be under the US. We want to make our own decisions. We want to be sovereign. I think France would have been better off with Le Pen, even though I'm a lefty and I disagree with her on a lot of stuff. You can't do anything until you have your sovereignty. And right now, the EU countries in and out of the EU have no sovereignty.
Well, I'm reading, in the news lines that I feed, that I read, that we are about to give up our sovereignty over our healthcare system. I don't know if you've seen these reports, but there is a new deal coming up between the UN and the WHO, in which it's implementing some statute that's been passed since 2005, in which purportedly the control over our healthcare is no longer controlled by the government, but it's now passed to the United Nations in the person of the World Health Organization, i.e., Dr. Tedros, will now be the healthcare czar for the United States after some date in late May of this year. Have you seen any of that?
I've seen some of it, but let's start here. He ain't even a doctor. The guy Tedros, he's not a doctor. He's the head of the WHO, and he's not a doctor. He doesn't see patients. He doesn't know anything about health. He's a puppet, right? Now, add this about who he really is. If you look at, he's from Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, there was an organization called the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or something like that, right? It's a fascist organization. It is an ethno-fascist organization, right? Kind of a black Nazis kind of thing, you might want to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the US is trying to use that TPLF. They ruled as dictators for many years, and finally the people of Ethiopia were able to get out from under these fascists, and the US is trying to get them back in power and overthrow the current government, right? Here's where I'm going to. The doctor head of the WHO is one of the top leaders in this ethno-fascist TPLF.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he is. So he's a puppet for the U.S. empire. And he's part of an organization that's trying to overthrow the government of Ethiopia and overthrow governments in Africa. So he's just another. He's one of them. He's one of their creations. So it doesn't shock me whatever the people at the WEF or the U.S. empire people or whoever, the Bill Gateses of the world, whatever they instruct him to do, he's 100% behind it. The World Health Organization is just another one of their tools to try to use to, in a manner of speaking, enslave us all.
One of the things that Mark Kulak's been concentrating on is the difference between medicine and science. And when you have a doctor of science that's in charge of something, then you totally avoid the Hippocratic Oath. You totally avoid the doctor-patient relationship entirely. You have no privacy. There's no rights of a doctor-patient confidentiality of any sort. It's all now become science. And this science is related to this big concept called One Health, in which, not only is human health, but animal health and, zoological health and, the atmosphere, everything is now going to be part of this big One Health system that is now going to pass, supposedly, and I think we all need to look into this, into the hands of that same Ethiopian warlord.
Well, you got to add this too. Science is about experimenting things to find out how it turns out and seeing how things worked out and experimenting. Where medical, if somebody's practicing medicine on me, right, a doctor is going to use the things that are safe and proven. Unless you're just about ready to go, then they may try something experimental at as a last ditch effort. But for the most part, a doctor's job is to say, wait a minute, let's see. We're going to choose something that we know works, that we've seen works, or your best chance. So a doctor is going to be very practical in how they apply their trade, right? But science is about experimentation. Well, we've got these new mRNA things. Wonder how they'd work. Let's just give it a shot. See, that's science. It's trying to figure things out and try to give things a shot and see how it turns out. Well, when it comes to our bodies, that ain't what we want. But it's obvious that I'll just say this: if you've been paying attention to the last couple of years, you see the difference between science and practical application of a medical doctor.
And I endorse the "Our Bodies, Ourselves" movement. In response to that idea of "Give me the shot," because I say, "Nein, danke," not for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh boy. Oh, yeah, that whole business of the economy now. Some people are saying, well, hey, inflation, we can do it. We can just keep on going. There's no reason to be concerned that we're going to go off a cliff. Other people are saying, we're running off a cliff. We're running off a cliff. How do you see it?
I, uh, you know, there are a lot of things going on right now, and one of the things, and this is, I think my thoughts of this. One of the discussions right now is about raising interest rates to ostensibly lower inflation. I've talked to a lot of economists, and what they say is it depends. If inflation is caused by runaway demand, then you cut you raise you want to raise your interest rates, and you want to tamp down that demand a little bit, right? You want to slow things up. Our inflation is caused by a number of other things that are very complicated. One of them being a supply issue. We can't get some of the things. We've got issues with supply chain, right? But another one, if we're honest, is they printed more money in the last 2 years than they printed in like 100 years before. But we're not allowed to talk about that part. So the bottom line is, because of the factors that are creating the financial instability now, the idea that you're going to raise interest rates and you're going to address all that money that was printed under quantitative easing and the supply chain problems is preposterous. The only thing that'll do, and I've talked to a number of economists right now, because we have unique problems that are causing our inflation. Right now, the only thing that'll do is throw us into a recession, which leads me to believe this. I'm talking to people with PhDs. I'm talking to, lifelong economists, regular economists, Marxist economists, all many different, and all say the same thing. Our inflation is caused by all this QE printing and the supply chain issues. Raising interest rates will do nothing but throw us into a recession, which leads me to believe only one thing, that it's intended to throw us into a recession. It's getting clear and obvious to me right now that there is an intent. Look at what's happening with the Russia sanctions. Biden comes out and says, well, these sanctions, and he said it, the sanctions are not just on Russia, they're on Europe and us too. What the hell you sanctioning me? What did I do? No, it is. I'm going to ask you how you feel about it. It is obvious to me that what they want to do right now is fry our economy, both in the United States, Europe, et cetera, that they want intentionally to do serious damage to the world economy. And I do feel like this, that in the long run, part of the plan may be this. They want to go to a digital currency. So what happens if the economy completely craps out, and if all of us only have a few pennies, and they say to everyone, look, here's what we're going to do. We know times are rough and nobody's got anything. We're going to create, everybody gets an account at the Federal Reserve, and in that account, we're going to put $2,000 in digital currency every month. And how much do you have in savings? Well, I got $1,000. We'll triple that. We'll double that. You give us that 1,000 in fiat money, we'll give you 2,500 in digital. And everybody's happy, begging them, please, can I go to digital too? I want to get more money. Yeah, you got savings. We'll give you 50% or more to go to digital. They will pay you. See what I mean? So they create this disastrous economic problem. And then you're begging them to switch to digital currency, because what the hell do they care? Digital currency, they just made it up anyway. I think what's throwing a monkey wrench in this, though, and that's why another reason they're so pissed at Russia and China. Russia's now talking about, and I think they've done it, and then they did it and stopped, tying the ruble to gold. Number one, I'm sure you've seen that. tying their currency to gold. Now there's a broader discussion because if you think about it, okay, we were, everybody said, yeah, tied to gold, but there's some holes in that because there's a limited amount of gold. And what happens if you get a whole bunch of big gold mines and you flood the market with gold and you know what I mean? But the discussion, if you think about it, is this: gold is just a commodity. So you don't have to tie your money just to gold. What happens if I've got lithium in my country and I can tie it to lithium, my currency, or if you can tie it to various other. So the bottom line is currency that's tied up and backed up by commodities instead of that magical crap that we just make up out of thin air. So you can see why they would be really pissed at Russia and China and some of these other countries, India, now South America. The guy Lula in Brazil is talking about a currency in South America that's tied to commodities. For people like me and maybe you who were, think the gold backed dollar might have been a good idea. I don't know about you at one time, but there's holes in it now. Currency tied to commodities will create a certain amount of stability, and it will mean that you can't just spend like crazy, that you can't just go and put $30 trillion in debt like the United States does. You have to have some manner of responsibilities, or somebody can come just take your commodities because that's what your gold, your stuff. So what do you think about that issue of money being tied? Well, a couple of things that I threw out. Number one, them wanting to wreck everything so they could go to the digital currency and they could have us beg them to put us back on, on some kind of an even flow, and the concept of currency being tied to commodities. And that's one of the reasons they're pissed at Russia and China and India and some of these other countries that are talking about going in that direction.
Yeah, two great issues. On the first one, in my opinion, the raising the interest rates is now going to make money for banks.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Okay. And why are banks going to attract borrowers? Because they are going to invest in real estate. Why are they going to invest in real estate? Because real estate is the best hedge against inflation. So guys that have the big money are going to be looking for, places to swoop up. Distressed properties are going to start looking attractive to, bargain basement, bottom feeder development, and or just the flippers, to just come in and your house is upside down. I'll give you 75,000, and you can.
Or in a terrible recession, you
Yeah,
lose it. Everybody loses their
oh,
house,
exactly.
and it just gets grabbed up by the bank.
And then it all just ends up in the hands of the people that want that real estate as a hedge against the inevitable results of this printing of money. I've heard him say that 80% of the money in circulation right now was created within the last 2 years.
Yes.
That
Yes.
is horrible, because it tells you that all the real money has been stashed away. It's far off the table. You're never going to see that money. The only money that's going to be available when push comes to shove is the money that's in circulation, and that's going to get gone. And as you say, a recession is likely. Well, that's the way it goes sometimes. This reminds me of George Soros plays. Remember when
Hmm.
he crashed the real estate market in England, and that is the kind of thing that they can do because they are so big. But that's my response to that. And as far as a commodities based currency, this is all about control of exactly as you say. I agree with you completely that in order to get their digital currency dreams, they've got to get Russia and China into their scheme of things. That's the rules-based order. We need you to join the rules-based order. You're not in the rules-based order. You're a problem. You've got to join us. And that's the seduction of this World Economic Forum and all of this stuff. trying to get them to come in, but China is been sent on a different path. China has been sent on the path of development, and they're doing great, and they are doing the right kind of sovereign banking system, where the money that they get is invested, and it's not invested in some gold mine, that nobody else is ever going to see. That you split with the sultan of some kingdom in Indonesia. No, this is money that's going to go into production, or into building the means of production, and they are building, and they are uh, maneuvering the things into a way that is going to look like what the greenies call sustainable. That's
Yeah.
where they're headed. They want to be the sustainable model for the world, and I think that's foreboding, because it's really technological control is the way that they're getting it. The lockdown in Shanghai shows you that this is a complete totalitarian state that can lock down and isolate, and remove you from you know just just a real horrible um, future, if you believe in liberty and the basic American Bill of Rights. It's horrifying, but at the same time, from an economic point of view, they are doing it right. It looks to me.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I'll say about China. Number one, and that is, and that is if you look at the evolution of any country, right? The evolution of countries. If you study Russia, what happened with the Soviet Union, right? You had 90% of the people that were peasants being sold with the land, living off bread and coffee, and not much of that. And when the communists came along, party, and said, "We'll guarantee you a job, we'll guarantee you a roof over your head, and a couple things, not much, but you'll get something." They took it because it was better than what they had at the time. But as the country evolved, at some point, when some of their better needs were taken care of, they started getting more concerned with, well, we want a little more freedom in this and that, right? And I think that's what happens with a country. If you look at China, the numbers say between 86 and 93% of the people in China are supportive of the government. Well, the reason is China was poorer than Haiti, and the people were very, very poor. China started making money. Now the people aren't as poor. They're happy about it. But I think there's a time when that starts to change naturally in China, and the people start saying, hey, we are comfortable now and we got a life. We want a little more freedom. And I think that develops. And I think one of the things that happens is the US thinks it's our job to go around the world and tell other countries how faster they should or shouldn't develop. And I believe in sovereignty. It'll happen on its own way. And let me add this: Americans who are looking at China better start looking at home. Because, in my opinion, this is a totalitarian state right now. In my opinion, we have the illusion of democracy. I have no confidence that I can vote for someone and that vote is going to be counted correctly in these machines where you don't even, a lot of the machines, there's no paper ballot, there's nothing. And in a couple of lawsuits where the machines had images of the ballots, and where one of the people sued and said, I want to see the images, the government erased all of the images before the person got to see them. So as we look at China or whatever country, I think people have to wake up to realize that we don't have a democracy anymore, that we don't even have two parties anymore. If you look at, like, right now, as people are struggling, as we have homeless people work their whole lives to get a business, they got their business going, and they did these lockdowns and shut all of these people's businesses, and people lost everything. Then they have nothing for an average working American who busted their ass to get on their feet and lost it all because of these stupid lockdowns. They got nothing for them. And now Biden comes out, we're giving $33 billion to Ukraine. And first of all, if anybody thinks that money's going to Ukraine, then I got a bridge to sell them between Manhattan and Brooklyn. That money's all going straight to, right off the bat, they said 20 billion of it goes to weapons, which means straight to Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. The other 13 billion when it hits Ukraine, a country, the most corrupt country in the world, that money's going straight to shell companies in Cyprus and everything else in the world. And Hunter Biden and all of his boys, they'll be there feeding at the public trough. That money will be pilfered into the hands of criminals. So that's, that my point being, we live in my opinion, when you see the level um, of censorship and the kind of crackdowns we're having, I feel like we live in a totalitarian state compared to what I believe, to my idea of what liberty and freedom should be. We're living in a totalitarian state, in my opinion, and we have the illusion of democracy. Democracy's done. We don't have it. I hope we can get it back, but I certainly do not believe or have any faith in the voting system that we have now.
No, it's horrible. This Dominion voting system and all of the horrible stories, and and in the media control, the combination of the computerized voting, which is insanity to me. It just goes, let's just go back to paper ballots, and I mean,
Right.
what was wrong with that? Let all the people of the town be the judges, and just do it like you can picture it in the 19th century being done.
I've been to countries where they do it. I've been to countries where I've seen it, where they write it and it goes in a computer, but they have the boxes of every paper ballot. And at the end of it there, if anybody complains, they can go back, literal paper ballots that are checked off for every single voter in the country. So you're going to tell me that so-called developing and third world countries can do that and we can't do it?
No, and it's because we are not smart enough to govern the country. That they have to do it for us, and they have to make sure that we don't get too much control. So they institute these things like just buffer zones between the people and the levers of power, and one of them is Dominion voting machines. They can just pull the lever, and guess what? Change suddenly. The result is different. And
I did want to ask you what you thought about this Scary Poppins, I call her, the woman that sings the Mary Poppins song. This is disinformation board. What are your thoughts on that? I haven't heard you talk about it.
I I don't know. I don't have a lot of thoughts about it. I was kind of shocked when I saw it, and I said, okay, this is the what is it from
The Ministry of Truth.
Ministry of Truth, and yeah, it is the Ministry of Truth. And I've done what I can. I go on my personal pages and I talk about, gosh, we can't. I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It's like I saw this little button on one of my Twitter feeds. Is remember the German button when it was we were against atomic power, and it had this little smiley face, and it said Atomkraft Nein Danke,
Yeah, yeah.
and then now that was 1972, and now they put 2022, and it says Atomkrieg, ja bitte. Atomic war, yes indeed. That's the Greens now.
Yeah.
The Greens in Europe are are completely subject to the sway of this media empire, and this psychological control that is exerted through so many ways. You know, but why in the hell was Bono in the subway in Kiev? Well, this is all part of some psychological wiki wacky that has they've planned it out and it works somehow, and it's just creepy as hell.
It is, we got a few minutes left, much time left, but I'll say this. The Ukraine thing is interesting. What's interesting to watch what happens when they come up with a plan and the plan doesn't work at all. Their plan was we're going to get this thing started and the Ukrainians are going to defeat the Russians. And I've been watching, the Scott Ritters, Jacob Dreisen, Alexander McCord. I watch and read all kinds of stuff. And one thing is obvious. Ukrainians ain't winning. They ain't winning at all. The Russians are winning this thing, and they're going to decide how this ends. Russia's only using somewhere between 15 and 30% of its military might. and it is surrounding you look there, surrounding the Ukrainians, and you're watching it, and you go around the world and see, and you see the things that happen, and then you turn on the news in the US and they say the exact opposite. Yeah, the Russians are, one Ukrainian guy with no bullets left charged a whole column of Russian tanks and took them all out. You're like, what the hell is here? So you look at this and you're like, all they do is try to control the narrative. And now it's obvious that Russia's going to partition off Ukraine and take whatever the hell they want to take and do it exactly the way they want to do it. And there's nothing NATO can do to stop them. And it's going to be interesting to see how that happens. The only thing that worries me is that these ignorant rascals, they can't leave good enough alone. They start this mess with Russia and they're like, well, that ain't working out. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see what's happening over here in Taiwan. And now it's like they're trying to fire up a problem or war in the Solomon's Island or with Taiwan. They're just like chaos makers. It's horrifying.
It is. Well, thank you so much, man. Sharing a opinion on probably at least a dozen different topics tonight, and I just intellectually, it's just such a pleasure to just kind of follow the thread and try to keep up, and remember. Oh, I wanted this question. Wait a minute. Oh, there's a better point. Let me make this point instead of that one. It's terrific, and I really enjoy it. So. And all the best to you with all your great media ventures and your show on Saturday mornings. Is that going to be a continuing?
As much as I can. I have a lot of fun. I enjoy bringing guests on, bringing a lot of people, bringing a lot of good guests on. So I'm going to do it as much as I can.
All right, Garland Nixon. Once again, thank you very much, and thanks to everyone in the chat room. Wish you a very good evening. Good night now.